Hi everyone, the GS papers of the mains examination have just gotten over, and I was having a look at this particular paper, and it makes all of us from the Smart Current Affairs program really happy that we could help the students a lot in this year's mains examination. So more than 30 questions have come directly from the Smart Current Affairs program, and this is what makes us happy that yes, it would have helped the students in the examination. And when I talk about the questions coming in the examination, I'm not just talking about the themes which have come in the examination, or let's say the topics which have come in the examination. I'm talking about the specific dimensions which was exactly taught in the classes. So that is where the skill set lies, that is where the challenge lies. Yeah, are you able to hit the right dimensions which can be asked in the examination in the classroom? And that is what we have been able to do. So I have a set of a few questions through which I would like to tell you how exactly the Smart Current Affairs program has helped the students this year. So if you look at the first question, it is GS2 question number 1. It talks about the topic of transgender person, specifically dealing with the issue of a self-identity related to right to privacy. Now, this exact same topic and the exact same dimension was dealt in the classroom also. So the issue of identity, how and the comparison of this particular thing from the previous judgments, from the previous times, and what exactly has been the changes in the law, all those things was very comprehensively discussed, especially section 4 clause 2 was discussed, right? The comparison was discussed, the issues with the amendment was discussed. So exactly the hitting the demand of the question which has been asked in the paper. And fortunately, coincidentally, this is the first question of GS paper 2, and this was the first question of my classes also. So that is something which is there. Now the second question, if we take about, this is from GS3 question number 9. It talks about the topic of fake news and disinformation, and specifically how exactly it is a threat to internal security of the country, and from the perspective of the changes which has been brought in the information technology rules. Now this, if you look at what was taught in the classes, exactly the same topic was taken: misinformation, disinformation, which is fake news. So we defined what exactly it is, the difference between various aspects of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and then what exactly is the impact of this particular thing, specifically from security dimension as well. And most importantly, we did discuss what are the changes which has been brought about in the IT rules also. So this addresses the question completely and directly in the examination. Now, if you look at the next question, which is GS paper 2, question number 7, this question is on malnutrition, but very importantly, they are specifically trying to ask about social equity, human development, and effective welfare governance. So this is the exact demand of the question, and this is what you will see, that in the classroom we had a very comprehensive discussion on the topic of nutrition from all the perspectives, from the perspective of child and adults and both, right, and from the perspective of obesity as well. So everything around malnutrition was covered properly. In fact, we covered multiple data points as well, which would have given you an edge in the examination. But more importantly, we also talked about the social dimension, like what exactly, why exactly the children are bearing the cost of this particular thing, which is the demand of the question also. And even more importantly, we did talk about the challenges and the limitations of the various schemes, which is where the social welfare component comes up of the answer. So this is what you see over here, that the classes covered the topic comprehensively. And not just that, we could hit the exact demand of the question as well. Now, if you look at the next question is on IPMDA. The exact same topic was dealt in the classrooms as well, and this is what really makes us happy that we could help the students. The next question is GS paper 2, question number 19. The question is on global diaspora, them being the living bridges and everything. So again, from the perspective of diaspora, we discussed it from the Russian diasporas, then the diaspora going to Europe, diaspora going to US. So all those aspects and various other countries, what all countries were discussed in the classroom, from every country's perspective, we did talk about the diaspora aspect as well. And that is where this question was also comprehensively discussed in the classes at all. Then if we look at the next question, GS paper 2, question number 20, which is China's Belt and Road Initiative, and specifically the question is trying to ask how exactly it has transformed the South Asia, and implication of BRI for India's security and regional influence in South Asia. So over there comes the topic of CPEC, and the exact topic of CPEC was dealt in the classroom, how exactly China is trying to build those trilaterals with Pakistan and Bangladesh, Everything of that sort was discussed in the classes, and therefore this question could be easily answered in the examination. Then when you talk about this question, a very interesting question which says that whether education should be considered as a welfare obligation for the government or it should be considered as a strategic investment. Of course, this involves topics of right to education and skill development, entrepreneurship, all those kind of things are going to come in. But specifically the question is asking how exactly to build a globally competitive and knowledge driven nation. And a very important step which the government is taking for this particular target of making it globally competitive and knowledge driven is the topic of internationalization of education. And this topic was very comprehensively covered in the classes. So if you would have written this as one of the points in the answers, definitely you're going to get a very good marks. So that is again, so although this question requires even more things, like it requires right to education and all those other stuff also, in fact the national education policy would form a very important part of this particular question. But this is a very important and innovative aspect of this particular question which was discussed in the classes. In fact, we did discuss about the NEP guidelines also in this particular class, and therefore you could have answered this question very comprehensively. Then when you talk about the next topic, which is of energy security, over here if you see, this is a very predictable topic. This is something which is going on because of the West Asian crisis also. India is focusing on the energy security. So comprehensively this was covered in the classes. And in fact we also discussed about the coal gasification. We talked about biofuels and how exactly they are part of India's energy security, what role can they play in the India's energy security. And we did discuss some of the questions also specifically on the topic of energy security. So again, this question you could have easily answered in the examination through the Smart Current Affairs program. Then the next topic, question of GS3, which is question number 2, the financial inclusion question. Again, very specifically all the things about this particular question was dealt in the classroom as well. Then we talk about the next question, which is GS3, question number 3, technology missions in the Indian agriculture and their role in food security. So have a look at it, all the technology missions, various steps which the government is taking, specifically the use of artificial intelligence in the agriculture and their impact and everything was comprehensively covered in the economics classes as well. Then when you talk about, this is a very important question, Agentic AI question. Now Agentic AI is something, if you do not know the topic, you would not be able to answer the question, right? And this is a slightly difficult topic as well. But guess what? This was comprehensively discussed in the classroom, completely, all the concepts, everything around it. And not just that, the question is trying to ask what exactly are the advantages, but also the risks and challenges with respect to Agentic AI. And that is what we had covered over here as well, that what exactly are the challenges Agentic AI is creating for artificial intelligence governance. And that is what makes the classes comprehensively and complete to answer this question as well. Then a very important question, question number 15 of GS paper 3, mission Drishti. Again, this year multiple students have found it really difficult to address this particular question because this is a very specific question which I really understand. But fortunately we had discussed this question in the topic of when I was discussing India's private sector, the role of private sector in the space industry. I had specifically talked about mission Drishti of Galaxy Eyes, and we talked about how exactly this is a very unique satellite for the first time. It's a first opto SAR satellite. We talked about the technology, we talked about all the significance of that particular thing. So that really makes me happy that we could teach our students this particular question as well. Then other questions like question number 2 of GS paper 2, which talks about women reservation. Of course, it's something which very predictable topic as well, and it was very comprehensively covered in the classes as well. Then you talk about this topic of startups and their role in entrepreneurship, innovation, employment. Again, so all those things were very comprehensively covered in the classes. You could have easily answered that. Then when you take the next question, which is of GS3, question number 13, Indian agriculture and how it has transformed the food scarcity to food surplus, and India's policy with respect to diversification of Indian agriculture. So again, everything of that sort was really covered in the classes as well. Then when you talk about this topic of money laundering, question number 20 of GS paper 3, and the role of FATF, very comprehensively we had a great discussion on money laundering, very comprehensive discussion on money laundering. So this is just a snippet of the handout. It was very elaborate at that point of time. And we also talked about FATF. Fortunately, we talked about FATF as well, and the reports, and what all has been the assessment of that particular thing. So in all, there are so many other questions which I can discuss over here, but I'll ask the team to upload this particular PDF on the website. You can have a look at it. The overall thing is that it makes us really happy that we could help the students in this examination. So I wish you all the best for the coming up optional paper and for the further journey of your examination. I wish you all the best. See you in the classes. Thanks a lot.